The luxury car pulled up to the gleaming entrance of the Grandeur Hotel, its polished exterior reflecting the afternoon sun. Maxwell Sterling stepped out, adjusting his custom-made suit and checking his expensive watch. The doorman rushed to grab his designer luggage while Maxwell barely acknowledged him with a distracted nod. "Welcome to the Grandeur Hotel, sir," the front desk clerk said with a practiced smile as Maxwell approached. "We have your presidential suite ready for you." Maxwell drummed his fingers impatiently on the marble counter. "I've been traveling for 6 hours. Make this quick." The dark circles under his eyes and the tension in his jaw showed his exhaustion, but the clerk had seen this type of guest before, wealthy, important, and not afraid to let everyone know it. "Of course, Mr. Sterling. Your suite is on the top floor. Here's your key card." The clerk slid the card across the counter. "Thomas will show you to your room." The elevator ride was silent as Maxwell stared at his phone, answering emails about tomorrow's business conference. This deal could take his tech company to new heights, if everything went perfectly. The pressure weighed on him, making his neck stiff and his temper short. When the elevator doors opened to the penthouse floor, Maxwell strode down the hallway, his leather shoes sinking into the plush carpet. Thomas struggled to keep up while carrying the heavy luggage. "Your suite is right here, sir," Thomas said, opening the door to reveal a stunning space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. But Maxwell's attention immediately fixed on something else. An elderly black woman in a hotel uniform was still in the room, fluffing pillows on the king-sized bed. "What is this?" Maxwell snapped, his voice sharp with irritation. "Why isn't my room ready?" The woman turned around, surprise flashing across her gentle face, lined with years of hard work. She was in her late 60s, with gray hair pulled back neatly and hands slightly knotted from arthritis. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said, her voice soft but dignified. "I'm Dorothy. I just need about 5 more minutes to finish up in here. The previous guest checked out late and—" "I don't care," Maxwell cut her off, dropping his briefcase on the nearby table with a loud thud. "I'm paying $3,000 a night for this suite. I expect it to be ready when I arrive." Thomas looked uncomfortable. "Sir, if you'd like to wait in the lounge, I can." "No," Maxwell interrupted again. "I want my room now, not in 5 minutes. Now." Dorothy began gathering her cleaning supplies quickly, her hands trembling slightly. "Of course, sir. I'll just—" Maxwell let out a harsh laugh. "Is this the best staff this hotel has? Someone who moves like a turtle? No wonder the room isn't ready." Dorothy kept her eyes down, dignity in her silence as she continued collecting her things. "How hard is it to clean a room?" "My company could program a robot to do your job in half the time," Maxwell continued, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling management. This is unacceptable." As he dialed, he glanced at Dorothy and added with a sneer, "Maybe it's time for retirement. The hotel needs people who can actually keep up with the job." Dorothy's hands stilled for just a moment, a flash of hurt crossing her face before she composed herself. Thomas looked mortified but remained silent, caught between hotel protocol and basic human decency. "Yes, I want to speak to the manager," Maxwell barked into his phone. "I just arrived at my suite and found the cleaning staff still here. Completely unprofessional." Dorothy quietly slipped past Maxwell, her cleaning cart making a soft squeak as she pushed it toward the door. Decades of pride in her work couldn't shield her from the shame of being spoken to like she was nothing, less than nothing. As the door closed behind her, Maxwell didn't notice the small photograph that had fallen from Dorothy's pocket onto the carpet, a picture of an elegant older man in an expensive suit standing proudly next to Dorothy, both of them smiling. Thomas, however, saw it and recognized exactly who it was. His eyes widened slightly as he picked it up and hurried after Dorothy, knowing that tomorrow would bring a reckoning that Maxwell Sterling was not prepared for. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the presidential suite, catching Maxwell off guard as he rolled over in bed. He'd forgotten to close the curtains after working late into the night, fine-tuning his presentation. Rubbing his eyes, he reached for his phone, 7:30 a.m. He had plenty of time before his 10 o'clock meeting with William Porter, the business mogul whose investment could transform Maxwell's company. The hot shower washed away the lingering fatigue, and Maxwell felt his confidence returning as he put on his lucky navy suit. He ordered room service, a protein-packed breakfast and strong black coffee, and spread his notes across the dining table. Everything had to be perfect for his meeting with Porter. Just as Maxwell finished his coffee, a firm knock sounded at the door. He frowned, checking his watch. It was only 9:15, too early for his business associate. Room service already picked up the tray, Maxwell called out, not wanting to break his concentration. Another knock, more insistent this time. Sighing, Maxwell strode to the door and swung it open, ready to dismiss whoever was interrupting his preparation. His irritated expression froze when he saw the hotel manager standing there, looking unusually serious in his perfectly pressed uniform. "Mr. Sterling, good morning," the manager said with a professional smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I apologize for the interruption, but there's a matter that requires your immediate attention." Maxwell noticed the manager wasn't alone. Beside him stood an older gentleman, perhaps in his early 70s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that Maxwell recognized as a bespoke creation from the same London tailor he himself used. The man's silver hair was perfectly groomed, and his posture radiated quiet authority. Something about his face seemed vaguely familiar. "What's this about?" Maxwell asked, his tone clipped. "I have an important meeting soon." The older gentleman stepped forward, extending his hand. "I believe your meeting is with me, Mr. Sterling, William Porter." Maxwell's eyes widened in shock. This was William Porter? The billionaire owner of Porter Enterprises was supposed to meet him in the hotel's executive conference room, not show up unannounced at his door. "Mr. Porter, of course, please come in," Maxwell stammered, shaking the man's hand and stepping aside. His mind raced, trying to understand why his potential investor had arrived early and with the hotel manager in tow. The two men entered the suite. The manager remained standing while Porter walked to the window, looking out at the city view for a long, uncomfortable moment. "Beautiful city," Porter finally said, turning back to face Maxwell. "I started as a bellhop in this very hotel 30 years ago. Worked my way up from nothing." His eyes, sharp and observant, studied Maxwell. "My mother worked here even before that. Still does, actually." Maxwell nodded politely, unsure where this conversation was heading. "That's quite the success story, sir. I'm looking forward to discussing how our companies can." "My mother's name is Dorothy Williams," Porter continued, his voice remaining calm but taking on a steely quality. "She's worked as a housekeeper here for over 40 years. The color drained from Maxwell's face as realization dawned. The elderly woman he had humiliated yesterday was this powerful man's mother. "Yesterday evening," the hotel manager interjected, "there was an unfortunate incident involving one of our most valued staff members." Porter reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a small device. Maxwell recognized it instantly as a thumb drive. "Security cameras captured the entire exchange," Porter said, placing the drive on the table next to Maxwell's presentation notes. "Several staff members also reported what happened. But I wanted to hear your side before making any decisions about our potential partnership." Maxwell's throat went dry, his carefully planned future suddenly hanging by a thread. The knock on his suite door had indeed changed everything, just not in the way he had hoped. A heavy silence filled the presidential suite as Maxwell struggled to find words. His hands felt clammy, and a knot formed in his stomach. The thumb drive on the table seemed to mock him, containing evidence of his worst behavior. "Mr. Porter, about yesterday," Maxwell finally began, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. "I was tired from traveling and stressed about our meeting." "I didn't mean to." Porter raised his hand, stopping Maxwell mid-sentence. "Let's sit down," he said, his tone firm but not angry. The hotel manager nodded respectfully and left the room, closing the door quietly behind him. The two men moved to the sitting area. Maxwell perched on the edge of the sofa while Porter took the armchair across from him, unbuttoning his suit jacket as he sat. For a moment, Porter simply studied Maxwell, his eyes wise and penetrating. "My mother raised me alone after my father died when I was 8, Porter began, his deep voice carrying the weight of memory. "She worked 3 jobs to keep food on our table. This hotel was her main job, but she cleaned offices at night and worked weekends at a laundromat." Maxwell swallowed hard, the reality of his situation sinking in. His planned business pitch lay forgotten on the dining table. She never finished high school herself, but she made sure I graduated college, Porter continued. Every night, no matter how tired she was, she'd ask about my homework. Education is the one thing nobody can take from you, she always said. Porter leaned forward slightly. You know what I remember most? Her hands. Always cracked and dry from cleaning chemicals, but every Sunday she'd put on her best dress and take me to church, and those hands would hold mine so gently. Maxwell looked down at his own manicured hands, shame washing over him. Yesterday, Porter said, his voice taking on an edge for the first time, those same hands were shaking as she called me. For 43 years, she has cleaned rooms in this hotel with pride and dignity. She's seen celebrities, politicians, and billionaires come through these doors. Some were kind, some weren't. But no one, he paused, letting the words land, no one has spoken to her the way you did. Maxwell opened his mouth to defend himself, but no words came out. The things you said, Porter continued, pulling out his phone and turning it to show Maxwell the security footage playing silently on the screen. About her age, her speed, suggesting she should be replaced by a robot. Each word landed like a stone. In the harsh light of day, seeing himself on the screen, Maxwell hardly recognized the man he was watching, red-faced, finger-pointing, looming over a woman old enough to be his mother. I own 60% of this hotel chain, Porter said, putting away his phone. I could have you removed right now, but that's not why I'm here. He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a worn photograph, Dorothy as a younger woman, standing proudly in her hotel uniform with a teenage boy beside her. That boy was me, on my first day working here as a bellhop. Mom insisted on the picture, said someday we'd look back and remember where we started. Porter's voice softened with the memory. She could have retired years ago. I've offered many times. But this place, these holes, they're part of her. She says working gives her purpose. Porter stood up suddenly, buttoning his jacket with a practiced motion. Our meeting is cancelled, Mr. Sterling. My companies won't be doing business with yours. The words hit Maxwell like a physical blow. The multi-million-dollar deal, gone. His company's future, uncertain. All because of 5 minutes of cruelty to an elderly housekeeper. Please, Maxwell stood, desperation creeping into his voice. There must be something I can do to make this right. Porter paused at the door, his hand on the handle. There's always something that can be done, Mr. Sterling. The question is whether you're doing it for the right reasons. He opened the door, then turned back one last time. My mother doesn't know I'm here. She would be mortified if she knew. That's the kind of person she is, still protecting the dignity of others, even when they don't extend the same courtesy to her. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Maxwell alone with the weight of his actions. Maxwell stood frozen in place long after the door closed behind William Porter. The suite that had seemed so luxurious yesterday now felt suffocating. He loosened his tie and sank back onto the sofa, his mind racing. He grabbed his phone and called his assistant back at company headquarters. Lisa, I need you to check our stock right now. Already dropping, sir, came the worried reply. Down 3% since opening. There's a rumor spreading that Porter Enterprises backed out of our deal. Maxwell ran a hand through his hair. How? The meeting was supposed to be confidential. Social media, sir. Someone from the hotel posted that William Porter himself came to see you and left looking unhappy. Investors are getting nervous. After hanging up, Maxwell paced the room, the gravity of the situation sinking in. The deal with Porter wasn't just about money, it was about credibility. Without it, the smaller companies they'd been courting would likely back away too. His phone buzzed with notifications. Business contacts at the conference were already canceling their meetings with him. Word traveled fast in these circles. Maxwell walked to the window, looking down at the busy street below. People hurrying to work, living their lives, unaware of how quickly a man's fortune could change. Just yesterday, he'd been on top of the world. A memory surfaced, one he'd tried hard to bury. His own mother, tired from her shift cleaning hotel rooms, but hands red and raw from cheap cleaning products because the expensive gloves cost too much. He was 12, embarrassed by her uniform when she picked him up from a friend's house. Why can't you get a better job? He'd asked her with a child's cruel honesty. This job is honest work, she'd replied, her voice gentle despite his rudeness. And it's putting food on our table and saving for your college. There's dignity in any work done well, Maxie. He hadn't thought about that conversation in years. After college, after his first million, after moving to a neighborhood where nobody knew about his humble beginnings, he'd carefully constructed a new image. The self-made millionaire who climbed to success through sheer brilliance and determination. The truth that his mother's backbreaking work had paid for his education, that her encouragement had kept him going when he wanted to quit, didn't fit the story he told about himself. Maxwell's phone rang, jolting him from his thoughts. It was his company's PR director. "We need damage control," she said without preamble. What exactly happened with Porter? Maxwell opened his mouth to lie, to craft some story about business disagreements, but stopped himself. "I was cruel to an elderly housekeeper who turned out to be his mother," he admitted, the words tasting bitter. The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably long. "Hello?" Maxwell asked. "I'm still here," the PR director finally responded. "Just processing. This is going to be tough to spin, especially if footage leaks." Maxwell glanced at the thumb drive still sitting on the table. It won't leak. Porter's not that kind of man. Somehow he knew this was true. William Porter wouldn't use his mother as a pawn in some public relations battle. After another difficult call with his chief financial officer about potential investor fallout, Maxwell ordered room service. But when it arrived, he couldn't eat. The young server who brought the food looked nervous in his presence, likely having heard about the incident with Dorothy. "Is everything okay with the room, sir?" the server asked cautiously. "Yes, fine," Maxwell replied automatically, then paused. "Actually, do you know Dorothy Williams, the housekeeper?" The server's expression softened slightly. "Miss Dorothy? Everyone knows her. She's been here longer than most of the managers. Makes the best peach cobbler for staff birthdays." After the server left, Maxwell sat at the dining table, his untouched food growing cold. Outside his door, the world of the hotel continued, guests checking in and out, rooms being cleaned, lives intersecting briefly. For the first time in years, Maxwell felt truly seen, not as the successful businessman he pretended to be, but as the cruel, ungrateful man he had become. And he didn't like what he saw. Sleep refused to come for Maxwell that night. He tossed and turned in the king-size bed, his mind replaying the events of the past 2 days on an endless loop. By 5 a.m, he gave up and sat by the window, watching the city slowly wake up. Street sweepers, delivery trucks, early commuters, people whose work made everyone else's lives possible, people he'd never given a second thought to before. As dawn broke, Maxwell made a decision. He showered, dressed in his most understated suit, and called the front desk. "When does Dorothy Williams start her shift today?" he asked, surprising himself with the nervousness in his voice. "Miss Dorothy comes in at 7, sir," the clerk replied with a hint of coolness. "She works the morning shift." Maxwell checked his watch. 6:45 a.m. Where would I find her at the start of her shift? A pause. Staff usually check in through the service entrance and have coffee in the break room before starting their rounds. The clerk's tone carried an unspoken question. "Thank you," Maxwell said and hung up. He gathered his courage and headed to the service area of the hotel, a part he'd never seen before. The employee break room was nothing like the plush guest lounges. Simple tables, a few worn couches, vending machines, and a coffee station filled the space. A handful of staff members in various uniforms chatted quietly. They fell silent when Maxwell entered, recognizing him immediately. Dorothy sat in the corner with a cup of tea, reviewing what looked like a list of rooms. She glanced up, her eyes widening slightly when she saw Maxwell. "Mr. Sterling," she said with professional politeness, though her discomfort was clear. "Is there something wrong with your room?" The other staff members watched warily. Maxwell felt their protective energy toward Dorothy. "No, nothing's wrong with the room," Maxwell replied. "May I speak with you privately for a moment?" Dorothy hesitated, then nodded. "We can use the small conference room," she said, leading him to a room across the hall that was clearly used for staff meetings. Once inside, Maxwell didn't sit down. Neither did Dorothy. "Mrs. Williams, I owe you an apology," he began, his voice quiet but firm. "My behavior yesterday was inexcusable. I was rude, disrespectful, and," he paused, searching for the right words, "and I judged you in ways that say much more about my character than yours." Dorothy's expression remained measured. "You're not the first guest to be unkind, Mr. Sterling, and you likely won't be the last." "That doesn't make it right," Maxwell insisted. "I've spent my whole life trying to distance myself from where I came from. My own mother was a housekeeper too." The admission came surprisingly easily now. "I was ashamed of that once. I shouldn't have been." Something softened in Dorothy's eyes, but she maintained her dignity. "May I share something I've learned in my 43 years of service?" Maxwell nodded. "I've cleaned rooms for presidents and movie stars, for billionaires and famous singers. Some treated me like I was invisible. Others knew my name and asked about my family. But I've noticed something interesting." She smoothed her uniform with hands that had seen decades of honest work. "How people treat those they believe cannot benefit them, that shows their true character." Her words struck Maxwell like a physical blow. "I want to make this right," he said. "Please tell me how." Dorothy studied him for a long moment. "Apologies are just words, Mr. Sterling. It's what follows that matters." She picked up her clipboard. "I have rooms to attend to now." "Of course," Maxwell said, stepping aside to let her pass. At the door, Dorothy paused. "My son William believes strongly that how we treat others defines us. He learned that from me, but I'm thinking maybe he spoke with you about it already." Maxwell's surprise must have shown on his face. A small smile touched Dorothy's lips. "Not much happens in this hotel that I don't hear about, Mr. Sterling. William doesn't know I know about your meeting, and he doesn't need to." With that, she walked out, leaving Maxwell with the realization that Dorothy's wisdom and dignity ran far deeper than he'd imagined. He stood there in the small conference room, surrounded by staff schedules and employee of the month photos on the walls, feeling both humbled and strangely hopeful. For the first time in years, he knew exactly what he needed to do next. Maxwell spent the morning in his suite, laptop open, making calls and sending emails with an energy he hadn't felt in years. By noon, he had a solid plan. This wasn't just about saving his business reputation anymore. It was about something more important. He called the hotel's management office and requested a meeting with the general manager, a stern woman named Patricia, who clearly knew about the incident with Dorothy. Her office was neat and professional, with awards for the hotel's service excellence displayed prominently on one wall. "Mr. Sterling," she greeted him coolly. "How can I help you?" Maxwell took a deep breath. "I'd like to speak with William Porter." "I have a proposal for him." Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly. "Mr. Porter is a busy man, and after yesterday's meeting—" "I know," Maxwell interrupted gently. "But this isn't about our business deal. It's about making something right." Perhaps it was the sincerity in his voice or something she saw in his eyes, but Patricia's expression softened slightly. "I'll see what I can do," she said, picking up her phone. To Maxwell's surprise, Porter agreed to meet him for lunch at the hotel restaurant. Maxwell arrived early, rehearsing what he would say, hoping it wouldn't sound like another empty corporate promise. William Porter entered the restaurant precisely on time, drawing respectful glances from the staff and other diners. He shook Maxwell's hand with cool politeness. "You have 15 minutes, Mr. Sterling," Porter said as they sat down. "I'm curious what could be so important after our conversation yesterday." Maxwell didn't waste time. "I spoke with your mother this morning," he began. "She's a remarkable woman." Porter's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "Yes, she is. She said something that's been on my mind, about how we treat people who can't benefit us, showing our true character." Maxwell opened his tablet and slid it across the table. "I'd like to propose something." Porter looked down at the screen, his eyebrows rising slightly as he read. "A scholarship fund for hotel service workers and their families," Maxwell explained. $5 million of my personal money to start, not corporate funds. I'll fund it for 5 years guaranteed." He leaned forward. "But that's just the beginning. I'm also proposing a staff appreciation program across all grandeur hotels. Better working conditions, educational opportunities, recognition for long-serving employees like your mother." Porter scrolled through the detailed proposal, his expression unreadable. "This is comprehensive." "I've also taken steps within my own company," Maxwell continued. "Our maintenance and cleaning staff will receive better wages and benefits starting next month. I've already spoken with my board." Porter set the tablet down and studied Maxwell. Why? Is this just to save your business deal? Maxwell shook his head. The deal would be nice, but that's not why I'm doing this. Your mother reminded me of something I've spent years trying to forget, where I came from, who helped me get here. He met Porter's gaze directly. My mother was a housekeeper too. She worked herself to the bone to put me through college. Somewhere along the way, I became the kind of person who would look down on her. I don't want to be that man anymore. For the first time, surprise registered openly on Porter's face. The waiter approached, but Porter waved him away, his attention fully on Maxwell. These programs, Porter said, tapping the tablet, they would make a real difference for a lot of hard-working people. That's the point, Maxwell replied simply. Porter was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. Then he reached for his water glass. I'll need to review this thoroughly, speak with my legal team. Maxwell nodded. Of course. And it doesn't change what happened. I know that, Maxwell agreed. Nothing can undo those words or how they made your mother feel. This isn't about erasing the past, it's about doing better going forward. Porter's expression softened almost imperceptibly. We could name the scholarship after my mother. The Dorothy Williams Opportunity Scholarship, Maxwell suggested. It has a nice ring to it. For the first time, the ghost of a smile crossed Porter's face. She'd be embarrassed by the attention, but secretly pleased. He extended his hand across the table. I'll consider your business proposal as well, Mr. Sterling, but separately from this. This stands on its own merit. As they shook hands, Maxwell felt something shift inside him, not the relief of salvaging a business deal, but the unfamiliar warmth of doing something genuinely right for the first time in a very long time. 6 months later, Maxwell Sterling pulled his car into the familiar circular driveway of the Grandeur Hotel. The doorman smiled in recognition as he stepped out. Welcome back, Mr. Sterling. Good to see you again. Thanks, Paul, Maxwell replied, remembering the man's name from his last visit. How's your son doing in college? Paul's face lit up. Straight A's this semester. That scholarship program you started is making all the difference. Maxwell nodded, genuinely pleased. That's great to hear. The lobby was decorated for a special event, the official launch of the Dorothy Williams Opportunity Scholarship. Photographs of the first group of recipients, all children of hotel service workers, were displayed proudly near the entrance. As Maxwell checked in, he noticed how differently the staff treated him now. There was warmth in their greetings, respect in their eyes, not from fear of his wealth or position, but from something he'd never experienced before, being known as someone who kept his word and did the right thing. His phone buzzed with a message from William Porter. Meet you at the event at 6. Mother is actually nervous about her speech. Maxwell smiled at the thought of Dorothy being nervous about anything. In the months since their first encounter, he'd come to know her as one of the strongest people he'd ever met. After settling into his suite, the same one where everything had started, Maxwell changed for the ceremony. As he adjusted his tie, he thought about how much had changed. His company had recovered from the initial stock drop. The deal with Porter Enterprises had eventually gone through, though on slightly different terms. But most importantly, Maxwell himself had changed. At precisely 5:45, a soft knock sounded at his door. When he opened it, Dorothy stood there in a beautiful blue dress instead of her usual uniform, looking elegant and slightly uncomfortable with the attention. Mrs. Williams, Maxwell said warmly, you look wonderful. This feels strange, she admitted with a small smile, being a guest instead of staff. You've earned this spotlight, Maxwell assured her. Those kids downstairs are going to college because of you. Dorothy shook her head. Because of what you did after our rocky start. No, Maxwell said firmly. The idea came from you. Everything good that's happened was because you showed dignity when I showed none. They walked together to the elevator, an unlikely pair now united by mutual respect. The hotel's grand ballroom was filled with people, hotel workers and their families, executives, community leaders, and the scholarship recipients themselves. A quiet hush fell over the room as Dorothy entered, followed by applause that grew until it filled the space completely. William Porter stepped forward to greet his mother, kissing her cheek proudly before shaking Maxwell's hand with genuine warmth. Quite a change from our first meeting in your suite, Porter said quietly, so only Maxwell could hear. Maxwell nodded. best thing that ever happened to me looking back. When it was time for speeches, Porter spoke first about the program, then invited Maxwell to the podium. Maxwell looked out at the audience, at the faces of people whose work had been invisible to him for most of his life. 6 months ago, I thought success was measured by stock prices and business deals, he began simply. I was wrong. Success is measured by how we treat each other, especially those we think can't do anything for us. He glanced at Dorothy. I learned that lesson the hard way, from someone who has more wisdom and dignity in her little finger than I had in my entire life. When Dorothy took the stage, her voice was strong despite her nerves. When I started cleaning rooms at this hotel 43 years ago, I never imagined anything like this, she said. I just wanted to do good work and set an example for my son. She smiled at William. I always told him it's not what job you do that matters. It's how you do it and who you are while you're doing it. Later, as the event wound down, Maxwell found himself standing between Dorothy and William, watching the scholarship recipients talking excitedly about their college plans. You've changed, Dorothy observed quietly. Because of you, Maxwell replied. Dorothy shook her head. No, Mr. Sterling. The change was always inside you. You just needed someone to remind you who you really were. Maxwell thought of his own mother, gone now for many years, and knew that somewhere, somehow, she was proud of him at last. Not for his wealth or success, but for finally becoming the man she had raised him to be.